I wonder whether you believe in coincidences. Do you think things just happen? I remember, it's 10 years ago now actually, I was at work and got called in with the rest of us in the office, and we're told that we've got made redundant. We're going to be made redundant in a couple of months' time when they went through the process. It was the time where Emily had was just about to go off to university, so it wasn't particularly a great time. And obviously we had 3 younger ones who were following on behind. And it didn't seem like a great thing happened at that time. And I was made redundant, and it took me the best part, well over a year, to find other employment. I tried lots of different things, different opportunities, got incredibly close a couple of times, but nothing ever worked out. Until I got a job 15 months later with Latin Link, a mission agency based in Reading. When you look back, I wonder, would I have ever made that jump from a well-paid job with a company car and all sorts of benefits that came with it, and take a massive cut in salary to go and work for a mission agency? To be honest, I don't think I would have done. But because I was made redundant, because I had to take that cut, that opened up opportunities further down the field. And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. Someone actually has said that coincidences are miracles where God prefers to remain anonymous. It sums up the words in Proverbs 16, which says this in verse 9, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." We're looking at the book of Ruth, and it appears as though lots of coincidences are happening. Last week we heard that there are 2 main themes within this book, one of kindness and the other of redemption. This week in chapter 2, we are really focusing on kindness. That is the big theme that comes out of this chapter. And I want to just look at it in 3 main ways. And the first one is that we notice is that kindness flows from God. God is indeed working his purposes out. It may not look like it. Humans may plan their own course, but God establishes their steps. We are on a journey, moving from the time of Moses and Joshua. We are now in the period of Judges, moving on to when the monarchy of Israel is established. And at the moment, things don't look great, do they? It's a time where God is predominantly ignored, where no one really wants to know much about him. But we see God working in the lives of his people. And verse 12 of Ruth chapter 2 is probably something that really sums up what this chapter is about. It says, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you," this is Boaz talking to Ruth, "be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Despite the circumstances, despite it being a dreadful time in Israel, despite there being a famine, despite Naomi and Ruth coming back and having nothing to look forward to, Ruth is under the wings of her God. Kindness flows out from God, and we see that worked out here in this chapter in 2 ways. We see God's provision. If you turn to Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 9, you read these words. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time, or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. Naomi and Ruth have just arrived back in Bethlehem. They have nothing. What are they going to do to eat? They're going to take advantage of God's provision in the law. It's harvest time, remember. That's how chapter 1 ended. It's the time of the harvest. And so Ruth is able to go out into the fields to collect grain, to make use of this law of gleaning. God is working out his kindness through the provision of a law that was made many years before. You see, God is not only concerned about our well-being, God is concerned about our whole person. Our physical, our mental, emotional, as well as our spiritual needs. And here God is making provision for those that are poor, for those that are vulnerable, for those that are needy. I remember when I was in Kenya just a few months ago, and I was working with a project called Life in Abundance, who are working in very poor communities, both in rural and in the cities, in the urban areas of Kenya. And they're trying to work with the local churches to help meet the needs of the local community. And the question that struck me from my time there was that they would go into an area, they would look at the needs of that community, and the question that they would ask of the church is, what is the church doing about it? The church were very good there about speaking about spiritual things, of teaching, but they neglected other areas of people's lives. And their question was, what is the church doing about the needs of that community? And we can ask ourselves the same question, can't we? What are we doing about the needs around us in Old Town? God is concerned for those that are needy, for those that are poor, for those that are vulnerable. And although Old Town is a pretty well-off area, there are still huge needs. Do we really know what they are? We know there is many things that we can do, and there's lots of things that we do through the food bank, through food.gives, through things like Friday Fellowship and other activities. And we need to be concerned for those that are maybe on their own, who don't have enough. Because God has provided for them. God is interested in them. But we also see God's providence. In verse 3, we read that, so Ruth went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out. As it turned out. Ruth knew nobody. She didn't know. She went out of the home. We're not told that she was told where to go. And she just happened to go into a field. And whose field was it? It was a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the same family group. Is that a coincidence? Is that God providing for them? And then not only that, we read in the next verse, just then as Ruth gets to the field, Boaz himself actually comes along. One commentator said it is in this seemingly insignificant circumstance that it opens up the door of blessing that God has in store for both Ruth and Naomi. You see, God is working his purposes out. He has his plans for us. And he is working his circumstances out, even if it doesn't look like it. Even if it doesn't feel like it. Even in the most difficult situations, God is at work. It didn't feel like it when I got made redundant. But God provided through all sorts of different ways, and in ways that Esther and I didn't expect. But God was working his purposes out. And that's as true back in Ruth's day, as in 10 years ago, as in today. For each one of us here who may be going through really tough and difficult times. We cannot see necessarily how the future is going to pan out. Ruth and Naomi certainly couldn't. But God was behind it all. He was working out the situations. He was putting the right things in place at the right time. He was bringing the right people into contact with Ruth and Naomi at the right time. And we can take encouragement from that, because God works in the most unexpected and the most unlikely ways to provide for his people, because we are those that are under his wings. We see that kindness flows from God. But we also see God's kindness demonstrated in the way that Boaz treats Ruth. It's a powerful demonstration of God's kindness to us. What do we actually know about Boaz? We don't know a huge amount, or certainly until we get to chapter 2. It doesn't appear in chapter 1 at all. But what do we know about Boaz? We know that he's a member of the family of Elimelech, Naomi's husband. He is in a position to help. He's part of their family. We also read in verse 1 that he is a man of standing. That could mean all sorts of different things, and depending on what version you're using, you will read different ways of what that might mean. It might mean a man who is worthy. It might mean a man of great wealth. It might mean a man who is mighty. It has all of these connotations. We know that Boaz owned fields, so that we know that he was a man who had money. A man who was a family member, a man who had the resources available. This is looking too good to be true, isn't it? But then, even more importantly, we read in verse 4 that he is a man of God. We see that by the way that he greets his, deals with the staff who are working on it, the harvesters working in the field. He greets them, "The Lord be with you." And they respond, "The Lord bless you." That implies that there is a relationship with God there, that Boaz is a man who trusts God, who is walking with God. Remember, this is the time of the judges. This is the time where people, on the whole, didn't want to know God at all. Yet here we read of a man who is willingly following God's way. He's keeping God's command. He's letting people come into his field to glean, as the law requires. And then as we go down to verse 8, we see Boaz's kindness in action as he has this interaction with Ruth. Verse 8, "Don't go and glean," he says to Ruth, "in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me." You see, Boaz is doing what God did. Boaz is making provision for Ruth. He's allowing her to glean in his field. He's allowing her to stay with the women that normally work with him. And then he goes on, more than just providing for them, he's offering protection, because he's getting the men to not lay a hand on her in verse 9. And if you're thirsty, to go and get something to drink. This isn't what would normally happen to somebody who was going in to glean. They would kind of be left at the back, just trying to pick up what was left over. But here, Boaz is bringing Ruth in to be effectively one of his harvesters. He is providing for her. You see, Ruth would have been very vulnerable. She was a foreigner. She was known as the Moabites. She was poor. She was on her own. She was going into fields where she didn't know anybody. And a lot of people in those days would have abused that kind of person. She was very vulnerable. But Boaz provides and protects her. But it doesn't stop there. Go on down to verse 14 and we read that Boaz now gives her some dinner. Come here, he says, have some bread and dip it in the vinegar. He goes way, way beyond what the law requires. The law required just for Boaz to open up his field to let gleaners come and take what was left over. But here he is providing not only provision and protection, but he's providing dinner, and he's giving instructions to the rest of his team to let Ruth collect way beyond what she would normally be expected to get. You just got to read down through verses 14 and 15 and 16 just to see the different things that he does to enable Ruth to get what she needs. He goes well beyond what would be expected of him. He is demonstrating kindness. I wonder why that might be. One interesting thing is if you read through the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1, you find Boaz's name there. In verse 17, if you want to look it up later, you will see that Boaz, we are told, was the son of Rahab. Who was Rahab? She was somebody who lived in Jericho, and you can read the story in Joshua's chapter 2 and chapter 6, who protected some spies who were going in when God was wanting the people of Israel to take over Jericho. She put her life on the line and was showed kindness by the spies and by the people of Israel when she opened up the opportunity for them to take Jericho. Boaz will have heard that story time and time again, I'm sure. He will have known how the people of Israel, after they had taken Jericho, looked after Rahab. He would have experienced kindness himself. He would have known the kindness from the people of Israel. And he wanted to pass it on. And isn't that often the way when people have been kind to us? We then want to be kind to others. There was a story of a young poor boy who didn't have anything to eat or drink, and he was going around knocking on doors. This was in America. And he went to one door and he knocked on the door, and a lady answered and he said to the lady, "Can I have something to eat?" And she went and got him a glass of milk. And he really appreciated that kindness, and he said to her, how much do I owe you for that? And she said, "No, my parents have taught me to be kind to those in need." Years later, he was working in a hospital. He was a doctor. And a case was referred to him of a lady that had a very rare disease. And he was called in because nobody could seem to get to the bottom of the issue. And eventually, he did. And this woman was made better. The woman happened to be the lady that had given him a glass of water. And she was worried when she went out of hospital to say, I don't know how I'm ever going to afford this bill. And then she received it. And on the back it said, fully paid with a glass of milk. Isn't that an example of us receiving kindness, wanting to share it on? Isn't that exactly what Boaz would have been doing? God had worked in his life. God had provided for him. He then wanted to share that out to those that he came into contact with. And that is a real demonstration of God's love for us, his great kindness to us. And we could take all sorts of places in reading in Psalm 103 or Ephesians chapters 1 or 2 about the incredible things that God has done for us. But I just want to turn you to Titus chapter 3. And in verse 4 we read that when the kindness and love of God our Saviour appeared, he saved us, not because of the righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy. He saved us through the washing of rebirth and renewal by the Holy Spirit, whom he poured out on us generously through Jesus Christ our Saviour, so that having been justified by his grace, we might become heirs, having the hope of eternal life. That's encourage you maybe just to go home and read that again and just ponder again God's kindness to you. That his love has appeared to us. It's been shown to us, not because we deserve it, but because of his mercy, he has saved us and brought us into a new relationship with himself, having the hope of eternal life. But the third thing that we see is God's kindness received. God's kindness received. You see, Ruth received this kindness. She was the recipient of this kindness. And it is a picture of us experiencing that kindness from God. And what do we see about Ruth in this chapter? We see that she realizes that she needs help. In verse 2, she said, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." She realized that she needed some help. She realized she needed somebody to look kindly upon her. And she went out. Ruth didn't stay in the house and wallow in the terrible situation that she and Naomi found themselves in. But she went out because she knew she needed somebody to help her. She couldn't help herself. But she also knew that she didn't deserve it. In verse 10, as Boaz has given her the opportunity of working in the field, she said to him, with her face bowed to the ground, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" And then in verse 13, she goes on to say again, as Boaz explains, she says, "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord. You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants." She knew that she didn't deserve what she was getting. There was no reason why Boaz really should do this for her. But he did. And she gratefully received what Boaz gave. And God has done the same thing for us. He's given us way beyond what we ever deserve. And do we recognize that we don't deserve it? We have this attitude, don't we, in the West, of our own entitlement. We deserve something, don't we? We're entitled to this, that, or the other. But when we look into God's kindness, we don't deserve that at all. Why should God show you and I kindness? To be honest, I don't know. Other than he chooses to do so. Ruth knew that. Do you too? Do you recognize that you don't deserve the kindness that God has given to us? But part of the reason we know that kindness was given to her is because of the testimony that she had. Boaz explains in verse 11 why he's showing kindness to her. I've seen all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and you came to live with a people that you did not know before. You see, Ruth had shown kindness already. Ruth had shown kindness to her mother-in-law. God had touched Ruth's life through Naomi when they were in Moab. And when both Elimelech and her husband died, Ruth showed kindness to Naomi. So much so that she willingly gave up her home, her family, her connections, and moved to a strange land. You see, her kindness is now being reciprocated too. Just as Boaz had been blessed by God and his life had been changed and he'd experienced kindness, he wanted to pass it on. And Ruth is in the same position. She's given kindness. Her life has been changed by God. She's now receiving kindness from Boaz. And then we go on to verse 17 and we get to the end of the day and we see that her life is transformed by the kindness that she receives. She finishes gleaning in the field, she threshes the barley, she carries it all home. And Naomi can't believe her eyes when she sees what Ruth is bringing home. In the note at the bottom in the church Bible, it says that she brought back about 13 kilos of barley, which they reckon was probably at least half a month's food in one day. Plus, she brought home the food that she'd been given for dinner. And Naomi couldn't believe, where on earth did you get that? Where have you been? Who has shown you such favour? And then Ruth tells her in verse 19, the name of the man I worked with today is Boaz. What a transformation we read then. Naomi's eyes, you can imagine the scene, can't you? Naomi's eyes light up. There is real hope now. Boaz, he's part of our family. We didn't get that, did we, when she was coming back into Bethlehem at the end of chapter 1, where everything was doom and gloom. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. Now it's changed completely. The Lord bless him, in verse 20 of chapter 2, Naomi says. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. You see, Boaz, she knew. Boaz had already shown kindness, it implies, to her family before. And now he's showing kindness again. And what's more, he's part of her family. And there is real hope now because we get the first inkling of what the rest of the book is about. When she says, this man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian or our kinsman redeemer. This is another provision that God had made to look after those that were in need, who were poor and in desperate situations. And you can read about that in Leviticus 25, but I won't go there because I'll steal what the rest of the book is about. But you come back next week and you'll hear more about what this guardian redeemer does. But there is real hope now for Naomi and Ruth. That God's kindness is overflowing to them. Now there is real hope that things will work itself out. Because they've come across somebody from their family, somebody who has the resources needed, somebody who is already showing them kindness. And it all comes back, doesn't it, to the kindness of God, flowing out to Boaz, flowing out to Ruth. And now they are seeing it all come together. Why? Because they are both, verse 12, under the Lord's wings. They are taking refuge under the wings of God. And Boaz's prayer is coming true, isn't it? May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded. And we're going to see how that's going to work itself out in their lives. Do you know something of the kindness of God? Have you experienced his kindness in your life? Have you seen what he has done? How he sent his son in our place to save us, to rescue us, to deal with all the wrong and the sin that we have done, that make us enemies and aliens and foreigners. But God has now reconciled us to himself through the Lord Jesus, through his kindness. It's nothing that we deserve. It's nothing that we have done that's to earn it. But God has shown his kindness. Do you know that kindness this evening? And if you do, are you moved to share that with those that you come into contact with, both here in the church and in the community outside? Because God's kindness flows out of him. And God chooses to show that through us, reaching out to those round about us.